This next story is one that I would normally have put under the Based Underground category, Based Underground being my conspiracy theory podcast, but I think we've gone beyond that at this point. I think that the information that has been coming out over the last 3 weeks really points to more than just a conspiracy theory. I think we have a conspiracy here, and I think it's one that does definitely fall under the realm of a national security threat. And I'm not alone. Apparently, Congressman Tim Burchett also feels that there is a possibility this could be more than just a bunch of wild coincidences. Of course, I'm talking about the disappearances and in some cases the odd deaths of various scientific and military people over the last year that point to something crazy. I mean, UFOs, fusion, astrophysics, it seems to be it's pretty dang wild. And that's why I was impressed when I saw the story come over my wire from Daily Caller. Ireland Owens over there did the investigation, put together some information. I've got this article cross-posted over at AmericaFirstReport.com for you to check out. It's titled, High-Profile Scientists Keep Winding Up Dead or Missing, and GOP rep, that's Burchett, suggests there may be a conspiracy at play. Again, you can read the whole article over at AmericaFirstReport.com, but I'm going to go over some of the bullet points. Several high-profile U.S. scientists and researchers have died or gone missing over the past year, raising questions about suspicious circumstances and potential patterns. Retired Air Force Major General William Neil McCasland, who oversaw advanced military research and had knowledge of UFOs, vanished from his New Mexico home on February 27th, 2026. Now, that bullet doesn't quite explain fully just how knowledgeable and how important McCasland was. This guy is the man who had the keys to the castle, the big UFO potential reveals, all the way through until 2013. He was even part of, or was in discussions with, the Hillary Clinton campaign in 2016 to participate in disclosure. This was one of her big semi-controversial claims, and now it's pretty conspicuous that McCasland has gone missing and still missing today, and he went missing just after President Trump announced that he was going to he was going to allow full UFO disclosure here very soon. Of course, that was in response to former President Barack Obama saying aliens are real, but he's never seen them. And he walked back the statement. But yeah, it's all sorts of crazy. Now, anybody who listens to my podcast over at Blessed Report, you'll know that I do not believe that UFOs are manned by aliens or creatures from other dimensions. Well, I do think they are creatures from other dimensions, just not what we think they are. I think that it is demonic in nature. And I actually did a show about that yesterday. You can check it out. Just go to Apple Podcasts, do a search for Blessed Report. You can find it over at discern.tv if you want to go direct. And we will have blessed.report up and running here very soon. It's on my agenda. I'm just trying to get a few more shows in before I put in the effort to actually build the site. I digress. Point is that, this guy was very important in the whole UFO realm. And the guys over at News Nation actually did. Let me pull that up. As a matter of fact, let's just play that because they did an excellent job of depicting just how important this guy really is. And then after that, we'll get into the other people that seem to be a whole lot of people that are going missing or wind up dead, all within the same field.
A 68-year-old retired Air Force officer has been missing since February 27th in Albuquerque, New Mexico. A silver alert has been issued. And that's typically reserved for older missing people, sometimes who have health-related issues. Now, to be clear, this isn't just any missing senior citizen. No. This is Major General William Neal McCaslin, a former commander of the Air Force Research Laboratory, the organization responsible for advanced military technology and science. He also worked on space systems and special programs at the Pentagon, projects that were so classified that many inside the government never even got to see them. And here's where the story really gets strange. The base that he once led, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, is historically linked to Project Blue Book. This is the reported U.S. military's official investigation into UFO sightings. McCaslin once oversaw a $2 billion budget and some of America's biggest secrets. So when somebody like that disappears, you know people start asking questions, particularly since McCaslin had disappeared right after the president announced that he was directing the release of UFO and extraterrestrial materials. So you can see why there are those online who are fully into theory mode right now, right? The FBI, multiple other agencies are now involved in this search. I want to bring in somebody who has been following this story closer than anyone, believes that McCaslin's disappearance has very important implications. Ross Coulthard is an investigative journalist who hosts News Nation's very popular Reality Check podcast, covers the stories that the mainstream media is too afraid to touch. Thank you so much for coming on the show. You called this a grave national security crisis. Why?
Good evening, Jesse. Well, Major General McCaslin, as you rightly noted, was an extremely senior commander at the Air Force Research Laboratories, which does a lot of the materials, aerospace, weapons research for the US Air Force and indeed the entire US Defense Department. He was in that role until 2013, and I'm told he was very, very highly cleared, very highly respected. And of course, as you rightly noted, Air Force Research Laboratories, Wright-Pat, is the location where the rumoured UAP materials from the 1947 Roswell incident were taken. It's long been rumoured to be a repository for top secret materials that were recovered from alleged non-human craft. And of course, McCaslin has been named previously in leaked emails that associated him with a plan back during the Clinton-Trump election campaign where John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, was involved in conversations with General McCaslin and another general from the US Air Force about what was clearly an intention to declassify and release UFO secrets to the American public.
He has a wealth of information, a storied career. The circumstances surrounding his disappearance are bizarre, to say the least. No clear direction of travel, no identified clothing. That's what makes this so odd. Before we even get into the allegation of, let's say, someone took him, can we just cut right through it? I mean, the idea that he disappears right after the announcement that there's going to be a release of these UFO files, these UAP files, extraterrestrial files. I know a lot of people are trying to make a connection. Is there anything you're seeing besides it just being a very strange coincidence?
It's an alarming synchronicity. I think we can put it at that, Jesse. We do know that General McCaslin was well respected by people who were pushing for UAP disclosure, including very senior people in Hillary Clinton's campaign back in 2016. We know he was planning to disclose UAP secrets in what was expected to be a Clinton presidency. And it's really interesting that this follows so closely, his disappearance follows so closely on the heels of President Trump's announcement that he was intending to declassify UFO files, a promise, by the way, which the president hasn't followed up on yet.
Well, Iran, I mean, that took center stage. Let me ask you this. Speaking of which, just got to throw it out here. If he was, let's say, kidnapped, if he was taken, who would want to take him? What would be some countries you would be looking at and say, wow, if they got a hold of this guy, you know, he's a wealth of information, he has the secrets, he could be useful to what we're building or developing?
Well, we're 10 days now into his disappearance, and I've walked those tracks around his home in Albuquerque. I actually tried to meet him by leaving a letter in his letterbox once and hoping I'd bump into him while he was on the trails, because I heard he was a runner. It's not a place where you would just disappear, even if you are medically incapacitated. So there are people now talking about the possibility of foul play, and the obvious suspects are potential foreign adversary powers. China, Russia. The general has a lot of the most sensitive secrets of the United States locked up in his head. Before he became the commander of the Air Force Research Laboratories, he was the director of special programs inside the Pentagon, handling some of the most sensitive secrets at the very top of the Department of Defense. This is a man who's cleared for some of the biggest secrets in the United States military and intelligence community.
The other way of looking at it as well, and again, since there's no definitive proof or announcement of foul play, is a silver alert being issued. We've seen it happen before. People who are older, who have some sort of medical issue, perhaps a mental health issue. I'm not saying that's the case here. But even so, it would be strange that he would, potentially disappear on his own and not be found. However, this is an individual who does have experience in the outdoors, right? And you do wonder, would he have the capabilities to disappear and not be found?
I've spoken to friends of his, and I've also read a statement by his wife, Susan, and they've made it very clear that there was no mental incapacity, that the general was extremely fit. He'd cycled 60 miles the previous weekend.
Wow.
He's well known for being a trail runner, an extremely fit, agile, mentally alert man. I suspect the silver alert is purely and simply because he requires medication that he has to take, which is just prescribed by his doctors. There's no indication that there was any kind of illness that would lead to him being incapacitated in some way and unable to return home. It's also unusual, Jesse, that he left his phone at home. It's a real question mark. It's almost as if, was he going out to meet somebody and he didn't want to be tracked or listened to? What is also puzzling a lot of his friends is the low-key nature of the FBI investigations. This is a very senior former Pentagon general, a man with some of the most sensitive national secrets in his head. It really hasn't featured much at all in any media releases by local sheriffs or by the FBI. Right. They're taking an extremely low-key approach.
Yeah, and they're dedicating a ton of resources to this, multiple agencies. Ross Coulthart, thank you for being on top of this. We're going to be on top of this as well. You can watch Ross's podcast, Reality Check, on News Nation's YouTube channel. Thanks so much for taking the time, sir. Appreciate it.
Crazy stuff, crazy stuff. And he's not the only one. Again, he's just the first one that we've really noticed. And one could argue definitely the biggest one that we know of. But there have been some other very notable people who, again, have gone missing or found to be dead. Monica Reza, a materials scientist at Aerojet Rocketdyne with NASA and Air Force funding ties, disappeared while hiking in Angeles National Forest on June 22nd of last year. The reason that it's coming up now is because authorities are, for whatever reason, they have the evidence, they have their reasons, they are now probing this as possibly linked to McCaslin's case. Now, I want to be clear about this. Between these two people, okay, and there's more I'll talk about here in a second, but just between those two, you would think that considering the gravity of their disappearances, and considering what they know and what we don't know that they know, that this would be a huge story. I mean, we saw, and I'm not trying to poo-poo on the Guthrie case. I've done that enough. I think it was a big distraction for whatever reason. It's unfortunate that Nancy Guthrie is still missing after all these weeks now, but that was given like daily attention. And yet here's a retired major general who was in charge of America's UFO research. And then this other lady, Monica Reza, who was an extraordinarily important person within Aerojet Rocketdyne, working with NASA and the Air Force, and we can assume probably working with DARPA as well. And now authorities are tying the cases together, and yet you don't hear about any of this really. Maybe a brief mention on Fox News or CNN or anywhere else. We'll call it about 1/1000th of the coverage that was given to the Nancy Guthrie case. People go missing, and I guess if your daughter is a show host, that makes your disappearance more important than if you have knowledge of the pretty much the entirety of America's UFO understanding, we'll say. Yes, this is very clearly being guided in some form or fashion. Legacy media has been told to stand down. If they try to get in at all, they get shot down. You got the people over at News Nation talking about it. You've got a handful of podcasters out there talking about it, but for the most part, radio silence. And that alone should tell us that, hey, maybe Tim Burchett is right. Other cases include MIT nuclear fusion physicist Nuno Loureiro, who was shot dead on December 16th. Now, if that name rings a bell, it's because who was he shot dead by? Claudio Manuel Neves Valente. Who was he? He was the man who was suspected of committing the Brown mass shootings. It's kind of weird. Remember, he went up and shot the scientist first. Who was this guy? He was a lauded theoretical physicist and fusion scientist who had been part of MIT's faculty since 2016, and his research focused on addressing complex problems lurking at the center of fusion vacuum chambers. Now, when we're talking about the ability to move the way that UFOs move, fusion vacuum chambers is right there at the center of it. And this guy was allegedly a tremendous expert. We're talking about the type of stuff that's part of the edge of the universe, okay? This isn't just your standard, interesting stuff there. No, this was groundbreaking stuff. And all these people that are going missing are not just your random scientists. These are all people that are either dead or missing that played potentially huge roles in, the potential for disclosure, which again is supposedly, President Trump has promised, will be coming to us very soon. Anna Paulina Luna has also said some things, including that she's very certain that between President Trump and Pete Hegseth both saying that disclosure is coming, that it really is coming. And then, of course, there's a movie about it by Steven Spielberg. So surely it must be coming soon. Let's see. Caltech, where was I? Sorry about that. Caltech astrophysicist Carl Gilmar killed at his home on February 16th. Novartis scientist Jason Thomas, whose body was found in a Massachusetts lake on March 17th after vanishing in December. Now, that doesn't normally happen, right? If people are murdered or they commit suicide or they die randomly, usually you find the body pretty quickly. When their body is found in a lake months later, that tells us there's at least a pretty darn good chance this person was either missing on his own or kidnapped, and then either something happened and he was murdered or whatever, and dropped into a lake, or maybe murdered at the lake. Who knows? Point is, all these things are happening, and Tim Burchett has publicly suggested that these incidents may point to a broader conspiracy, noting the numbers appear unusually high in specific research fields and urging scrutiny without trusting government explanations. That's one of the reasons I like this guy so much, because he really does hate the people that he works with. He does. I mean, he might be nice. He's kind. He's a gentleman. But he's also a gentleman who I believe, if there's anybody in Congress who's real, it's him. You might disagree with some of his stances. You might disagree with his style. You might not like the way he talks. Okay? But I feel that either he's a great con man or he really is genuine. And he does, again, hate the people he works with. He hates government. Why is he in government? He's in government to try to change government. That's why I like him. And I hope, man, I've been disappointed so many times. I hope I'm not proven wrong. He might be the ultimate version of disinformation being used to con people like me. But I don't think that's the case. I hope it's not. Burchett highlighted connections to secretive areas like UFO research and advanced technology, stating that disappearances occur under suspicious circumstances and that we'd better be paying attention. Investigative journalist Ross Cohart, you just saw him, so I don't need to go into detail about him. Official responses vary. Some cases show no initial evidence of foul play, while others remain under active investigation, including potential ties between disappearances. It's not just just McCaslin and Reza that they're seeing connections to. They're apparently seeing connections across the board, which again, this should be big, huge news. And the fact that it isn't tells us that it's big, huge news. Let's see. The clustering of these events among experts in aerospace, fusion, astrophysics, and military-linked fields has fueled speculation about national security risks and possible suppression of knowledge. Burchett's comments reflect growing unease that these are not isolated tragedies, but warrant serious congressional and public attention. Now, let me throw out a quick, I don't want to call it a disclaimer, just a quick warning that we're going to be given a ton of information going forward. I don't want to even say in the coming days, weeks, months, years, however long. Just basically assume that as of today, as of right now, they're going to be bombarding us with information. There's going to be story after story after story. There's going to be disclosures, contradictions. There's going to be people fighting. They're going to try to overload us. They're not going to. They're in the process of trying to overload us with all this information. You notice, let's be clear, Jeffrey Epstein, that should be the biggest story out there. There's a bunch of stories that should be the biggest story out there. John Solomon sent me a story about how China pretty much hacked the 2020 election. The U.S. government knows it. This isn't theory. This isn't, some election deniers out there. No, this is the FBI that is declaring this. And yet, that's not making the news. Of course, we've got the Iran war that's going to dominate. But even before the Iran war, there was all sorts of crazy things that were happening. Sometimes they were big and they didn't get reported nearly enough, like Epstein. Sometimes they were smaller but got overreported, like Guthrie. It's just, you don't know what to trust. This is one of I would say this is the number 2 reason, the second most important reason that we are launching Discern Media, Discern.tv, DiscernReport.com. We're combining it with AmericaFirstReport.com. We're trying to bring together various disciplines, various aspects of this little mini media empire so that we can reach the people. And again, it's not reaching the people with the news that they're telling us to report. We're going to try to reach the people, reach you and your friends and cohorts, so be sure to share this. We're trying to reach you with stories like this one. You have the guy who, again, has the keys to the castle, to the entirety of America's UFO knowledge. You have scientists who just happen to be randomly disappearing while also playing around with advanced technologies that all seem to have some sort of military-industrial complex ties. I don't know if this is the deep state, if it's our own government, if it's powers and principalities, globalist elite cabal, the New World Order, the Illuminati. It's somebody. And maybe it's multiple somebodies. But they're coming after us, folks. Pay attention to this stuff. Pay attention to the disappearance of retired General McCaslin. Pay attention to the disappearance or deaths of these highly respected and oddly united, or not united, but connected scientists. There's probably more that we don't even know about. People that barely made the local news, and yet their deaths or disappearances were also huge. The information is coming out, and the only way that they can stop it from exposing them is to throw more information out there about other things. They can no longer hide things by keeping them in the shadows, so they hide them in the exact opposite manner by throwing out more noise, more information, more distractions. You can hide things in the darkness, or you can use the floodlights to blind the people from seeing it. Either way, we have a challenging time seeing the truth. And this is why we do what we do. So please pray for us. We need it. That's really all. You don't have to. I'm not going to ask you to send me money or anything. Just pray for us. That's the most important part. It's getting crazy out there. But we have no fear because God has a plan. I just want to make sure that I'm on the right side of it.
It's the smell.
It seems like just about every conservative podcaster, show host, whatever, in today's podcastosphere has a gold sponsor of some sort. And the unfortunate reality is the vast majority of these gold sponsors will push what's called numismatic coins. The reason they do this, they push these quote unquote collectible coins, is because they can charge extremely high margins on them. We're talking 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, or higher. As hard as it is to believe, that's why they're so focused on these collectibles, because they can build a false value into the price and get people to buy them, to roll over their IRA or whatever. I work with a company that specializes in just straight up bullions, rounds, the stuff that you take it, you weigh it, you see what the price of gold or silver is, and that's how much it's worth. It's not about, oh my gosh, look at this picture of this whatever, whoever, somebody, something on the front. Oh, this is so great. This is amazing. It's going to be worth so much more than just your average silver round, which is what my guy likes to promote. Check him out. His name is Ira. He's a stud, and you can learn more from him by going to advisorbullion.com. That's advisor, Bullion, advisorbullion.com, or easy to remember, jdrucker.com/gold. That's probably the easiest way to do it. jdrucker.com/gold. Ira will walk you through. If you want to just pay cash, you just want to wire a few $1,000s and get it shipped discreetly to your door, and so you can put it in your safe, awesome. If you want to have a rollover or whatever for your retirement account, awesome. Ira can help you with all of that stuff. So check him out. Go to jdrucker.com/gold and get the real stuff. Way back in 2021, 22, even into 23, there were a whole bunch of mysterious incidences at various food processing plants across the nation, across North America, and really, you can see it across the world. Now, at the time, I had to do a debunking of a debunking. I was called out of whoever, Snopes or PolitiFact or whatever, for saying that there had been an increase. And they said, no, these are actually, these industrial disasters happen all the time, except when I checked through Google News, I found that it was not even close. There were more incidences of various food processing slash farms slash dead cows. These mysterious incidences were over tenfold higher than they were previous. And I had checked through Google News through a decade's worth, and there was more in 2022 than there were for the previous decade combined. And so got to debunk the debunkers. That was fun. But it died down. I mean, we saw a decrease shortly thereafter, which is funny because it further reiterated the point that I was trying to make, which was that it was intentional. I bring this up as it pertains to today because I'm feeling the same vibes when I hear about this Australian ammonia plant, this massive ammonia plant going down and going down for 2 months. Why is it going down for 2 months? Well, because they had a power outage. And apparently this power outage, this power glitch, they weren't even calling it a full-blown outage. They call it a power glitch that sent everything into disarray to the point that they have to shut the entire facility down and stop making ever-important ammonia for fertilizer and for other uses for 2 full months. This, of course, comes as we are already in the middle of a massive fertilizer crisis with the Strait of Hormuz essentially shut down. Now, I'm not going to say that one incident makes for proof. It could be coincidental, but by golly, it feels like it's not. I mean, what are the chances, right, of this obscure, unprecedented glitch happening right at the worst possible time? We have an article over at basedunderground.com that goes into everything about not just the glitch in Australia, but also about the fertilizer challenge we're already having with the Strait of Hormuz itself. And there's something that I need everybody to understand before I get into the article itself. It's that food prices, food shortages, there's always a delay surrounding events. In other words, a drought, for example, might not affect food availability or pricing immediately, but it could happen in weeks or most likely months and sometimes even years before we really feel the effects. Even though we can look around, we can go to the grocery store, and we can see that certain food prices are going up. This is nothing compared to what will happen in approximately, they say, the experts say, 6 to 9 months when it's really going to hit. Now, we're going to get hit here in the United States. Worldwide, they're going to get hit a lot harder than we are. So we are blessed as a nation with independence in many forms and fashions, including food. And one other area where we're feeling the heat on with gas prices, but nothing compared to what's happening in Europe and Asia, where the gas prices are going up far higher, far faster, because again, at least in Europe, they went all green, and now all of a sudden they're begging for petrol, as they call it. Whereas in Asia, they just never had it. I mean, they've always just had to rely mostly on the Middle East, as well as us, Venezuela, places like that, to supply them their fuel. So this is a worldwide crisis, a worldwide disaster, a series of them that are in the process of happening. Now, don't take that the wrong way and say, oh, he must be, going against Trump and blaming Trump for the Iran war. No, I still blame Iran for the Iran war. I know that there are many of you out there who are vehemently opposed to the war. I did not want the war to happen to begin with, but since we're in it, I am of the mind of, we're here, fine, let's get it done. When you're going through hell, keep going, right? Well, that's where I'm at on this. Okay, I didn't want the war to start, but now that we're here, let's see it all the way through. There's no need for me to bellyache about regime change or anything like that. We're in process. It's already happening, and therefore it does not behoove me to, or anybody, to try to steer the bus back in the other direction. The genie is out of the bottle. And as far as justification goes, people will say, oh, Iran wasn't a threat. Iran is a threat, still currently. Iran has been a threat, and Iran was growing as a threat. We are talking about a nation that has, for 47 years, declared that they would like to destroy America. They have chanted death to America, and this isn't just some radicals on the streets. We're talking about leaders in their military, leaders in their government, and leaders of their theocracy itself, their religious leaders, all of whom have called for death to America. And here's a nation chanting death to America that is trying to get nuclear weapons. So yes, I do consider them a threat. And we learned over the weekend, as they were able to send ICBMs, not just regular ballistic missiles, technically intercontinental ballistic missiles that were able to travel 2,000 miles, that could strike the heart of Europe. Yeah, these guys are serious. And just as President Trump said, their reach is far greater than the world was willing to acknowledge. We even had leftist legacy media saying they were surprised and shocked, and their experts, they were having experts on that said, oh, we had no idea that they had the capability of striking so far away. And for those who aren't familiar with how ballistic missiles work, range is just a matter of fuel, right? So the getting over the hump of being able to go, launching a missile 500 miles is hard. Launching it 1,000 miles is much harder. Launching it 2,000 miles is much, much, much harder. Once we start getting into much further than that, now all of a sudden, it's not that hard. I know it sounds weird, but that, it's sort of the concept of the hardest million to make is your first million. Well, the hardest range to reach is 2,000. Okay? Once you can hit 2,000 miles away, you're not far off from being able to reach 5,000 miles away, because again, it's just a matter of being able to have the fuel to get it up into the stratosphere, and then from there you can strike almost anywhere in the world with far less fuel than it takes to. It's getting up high enough. That's the hard part, right? Well, apparently Iran is either close or possibly there. In other words, they were very close to being able to hit the United States of America's mainland. So I'm not trying to justify the war. I'm not going to get into that. The point is that we're there, we're doing it. We need to get it over and done with. That includes reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Now, early Monday morning, President Trump declared that he's in talks with Iran, that they were looking promising, that he was putting a 5-day delay, postponement of his promised attack on Iran's infrastructure. He had demanded that they reopen the Strait of Hormuz fully and immediately, or he was going to start taking out their power plants. And he put a 5-day delay on that. Now, Iran, for their part, they're denying it. At least some, the vocal members in Tehran are saying that there are no talks, and they're still going to keep hitting ships. So we'll see how this plays out. I don't know what the play here is on either side, but at least for now, it seems as if we have a reprieve from a full-blown decimation of Iran's ability to do pretty much anything at all, at least for their civilians. And I do not, as much as I want this war to end, I do not see taking out their infrastructure as a positive move, even a wartime move, because it's not the government, it's not the military that's going to be most affected by that. It would be the people. And that is very unfortunate, because it's the people that want President Trump to succeed, that want the regime to be changed and to go to a secular democracy, which is what we should want as well. But again, not here to talk about the politics. Let's talk about the food. Strait of Hormuz does need to reopen as soon as possible. We need it. It's the threats. Everybody's talking about the fuel, but the threats to the food are multifaceted. It's not just the fertilizer, the urea, the ammonia, all the various components that help our farmers to grow food. It's also aspects such as diesel. With diesel over $5 a gallon, that's a major challenge for us. It's a major challenge for our food suppliers, our farmers, our ranchers. It's on top of the greatly escalating prices on fertilizer. So this is a domino effect, and we don't necessarily feel it today. It could be shutting down some fields, farmers deciding, you know what, we've done the math. Math doesn't math, so we gotta pull back on some of the crops. And by pulling back on some of the crops, that can raise prices, and you see how that particular domino falls. Throw in to the mix what's happening in Australia, throw into the mix what's happening worldwide, with countries starting to bid higher for food, knowing that their food security is at risk, and all of a sudden, even worldwide events are going to be affecting the United States, despite our independence. This is a big deal, folks. I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend that you start stocking up as much as possible on foods. Get your pantries filled. I'm not saying go get your prepper farm going, though that might not be a bad idea. I'm not saying go get a homestead or a bunker, though that definitely would not be a bad idea. All I'm saying is that at this point, it would behoove you to make sure that your cupboards are stocked with cans, with tons of rice, tons of beans, canned meats, canned everything, and if you do want to get into more aggressive preparedness, get into longer term stuff, get into canning, get into dehydrating, and definitely get into freeze drying. These are things that we all should have been doing for a long time. We have grown very complacent here in the United States of America because of our blessings. It's sort of made us a little bit weak when it comes to handling massive adversity on the survival scale. We don't generally, if you're listening to the podcast, chances are you haven't gone a week without food at any point recently, we'll say. Maybe you have, I don't want to assume, and I'm not saying that none of you have, but most of you are eating every day. Well, what if you can't? These are the questions that we've never really truly had to ask, at least in middle class America. And now we're there. Now it is possible that food prices could skyrocket in the next, they say, 6 to 9 months. I would argue that it's probably more likely in 1 to 2 years. But still, the effects of everything that's happening, and that's with what's currently happening, if the globalists decide that they really want to go full-blown Henry Kissinger, he who controls the food supply controls the people. If they're wanting to start to control the people more and more and more, this would be the perfect time for quote-unquote accidents and glitches and attacks, even direct terrorist attacks on food supply that can can make the brewing crisis, get worse and worse and worse. Not here to fearmonger. I'm telling you, folks, you just need to be aware and start to prepare. Be aware, start to prepare. I'm a poet, and I didn't even know it. So this article over at Based Underground, I'm going to have it read to you in its entirety because it is important to have this information. And then on the other side, I will be back for some additional commentary. The world's food supply stands on a precarious edge as two separate but compounding disruptions in the fertilizer industry threaten to send grocery prices climbing in the coming months and years. Geopolitical turmoil in the Middle East has choked off vital export routes through the Strait of Hormuz, a critical artery for nearly half of global urea and a significant portion of ammonia shipments. At the same time, a technical glitch has idled Australia's largest producer of ammonia, a key building block for fertilizers, for up to 2 months. Together, these events are not abstract supply chain headaches. They represent a direct challenge to the harvests that feed billions and the budgets of families already stretched thin. Alexandra Prokopenko, a fellow at the Carnegie Russia Eurasia Center and former advisor to the Bank of Russia, sounded a stark warning on social media. She described a near shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz as triggering a supply shock that will manifest in food prices within 6 to 9 months. Her analysis breaks the impact into waves: immediate fertilizer price spikes and contract disruptions, followed by reduced planting and lower yields in the third and fourth quarters of 2026, particularly devastating for regions in Africa and South Asia that cannot easily pre-purchase supplies. By 2027, retail food inflation could hit import-dependent economies hard. Reports confirm urea prices have already jumped 25 to 30% since late February, with Gulf producers declaring force majeure on contracts to South America and Asia. Roughly 1 million metric tons of fertilizer sit stranded in the Gulf, legally severing buyer agreements rather than merely delaying them. Compounding the Middle East issues is the unexpected 2-month shutdown at Yara's Pilbara plant in Australia. This facility, operated by the Norwegian company Yara, produces 850,000 tons of ammonia annually and accounts for about 5% of globally traded ammonia. The power outage damaged equipment at a moment when global supplies were already tightening. Much of this ammonia goes into urea fertilizer production, essential for crop nutrition, and technical ammonium nitrate used in mining operations, including iron ore blasting in Western Australia. Australian farmers now face local shortages precisely when seeding demands peak. The country's heavy reliance on urea imports from Gulf nations, disrupted by the same Hormuz issues, makes the timing particularly unfortunate. In the United States, the American Farm Bureau has raised alarms about the effects on domestic agriculture. With spring planting underway, farmers are confronting higher costs for nitrogen fertilizers at a time when many were hoping for a break-even year. Dr. John Newton of the Farm Bureau warned that the disruptions carry severe implications for productivity, which will translate into dramatic effects on food prices. Approximately half of global food production depends on synthetic fertilizers, meaning yield drops could ripple through supermarkets and dinner tables worldwide. Farm leaders describe an environment of exhaustion after years of challenges ranging from inflation to previous global events. Acreage reductions are already under discussion as input costs climb and profitability calculations no longer add up for some operations. Diesel prices pushing above $5 per gallon only add to the burden. The International Energy Agency has noted that full recovery of energy flows in the Gulf region could take 6 months or longer, describing it as potentially the biggest energy shock on record. This backdrop amplifies the fertilizer story, as energy costs directly influence production and transport of agricultural inputs. Notably, the disruptions create opportunities for alternative suppliers. Russia, a major exporter of ammonia, nitrogen fertilizers, and potash alongside Belarus, has seen increased interest from importers in the global south. Nigerian and Ghanaian buyers are reportedly placing pre-orders with Russian sources for later quarters. Policy responses are already in motion. American farm organizations have urged protective measures, including naval escorts for shipping, suspension of certain import duties, and regulatory waivers. Recent agreements on some of these steps offer a measure of reassurance, though the scale of the challenge requires sustained attention. For everyday Americans and consumers globally, the message is clear. Vulnerabilities in distant supply chains eventually reach the kitchen table. Whether through higher prices for staples or reduced availability in certain regions, the effects of these fertilizer constraints will test resilience. This situation calls for clear-eyed assessment rather than panic. Building personal and community food security through gardening, local sourcing, and prudent planning has never been more prudent. At the national level, reducing dependence on fragile international choke points for essential agricultural inputs deserves priority. The convergence of the Middle East export crisis and the Australian production halt serves as a reminder of how interconnected and fragile modern food systems have become. As the countdown to potential yield impacts begins, vigilance and proactive measures will determine whether this remains a manageable adjustment or evolves into a broader shock affecting families and economies alike. So, what's the moral of the story here? Food shortages, food price challenges, we'll say, they are very likely coming. But here's the thing, and this is where, I feel good about not causing people to panic unnecessarily. If you do it right, if you get your food preparation done the right way, then there's not really much of a change. Sure, you have to invest a little bit now for the future, just like our good buddy Joseph did in the Bible when he discovered through the Pharaoh's dream that there would be 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of famine. He knew that the time was right to stock up, to store that food away, and it didn't go to waste. And if you do it the right way, then it won't go to waste either. I'm not suggesting you have to build up a huge food supply, years, decades worth. That wouldn't be a bad idea if you have the resources. But most of us don't have the resources to go buy what would equate to probably tens of thousands of dollars worth of freeze-dried food. So we can, at the very least, get prepared for an extended period of time just in case there really is a massive increase in food prices. And the best way to do that is to just buy the food that you would normally eat. There is a shift, though, into foods that can last for an extended period of time, such as the aforementioned rice and beans and pastas, things that are dry that you can store in a airtight container, cool, dark place. Keep it for a long time, for years if necessary, decades really. But we're not talking about sustaining for that long. As far as cans, keeping a nice supply of canned foods available and rotated. Most canned foods say they last for about 2 years. The real shelf life is longer than that. I'm not going to try to get into trouble and say, oh, you can eat the food that's expired. Technically speaking, most of the dates that are on these cans are best by dates, not expiration dates. But you read through it, make sure, do your research, find out how to detect. And it's not hard. You don't need like some chemistry kit. You can tell if food's been compromised in the can based on the appearance of the can. The feel of the can. Is it punctured? Is it bloated? Is it sticking up at all? Once you open it, you can use your eyes, you can use your nose, and yes, you can even taste it to see if it's bad or not. Now, ideally, you're keeping a rotating supply, and a lot of it. Does that mean that you have to change your diet a bit? Perhaps, but not much. Just, if you're getting, I don't know, Wolfgang Puck vegetable beef soup, which is actually really good, just get, a lot of it. and then eat one every few days and keep a nice rotation of it going. Build up your food supply to where if you have to stop or if you're unable to purchase food for an extended period of time that you have plenty sitting there and available. And the good part about, I mentioned the pasta earlier, you can keep lots and lots of pasta for an extended period of time, as well as canned pasta sauces. Those, I would say most of you listening like pasta. Add in canned meat, which isn't very good. I'll acknowledge that it's not very good, but add in that, and you've got a meal. Now you can always go with freeze dried meat as well, which can be more expensive, but also it can last for much longer. 25 years is the going time period for freeze dried meat, and it does retain more of its nutritional value as well as its flavor. So there are options. Take the food that you're eating today, get more of it, get into a rotation so that you're not wasting any of it, and that should suffice. As long as you have, go from your standard average American household of 2 weeks worth of food and extend that to 2 months, and maybe extend that to 6 months, and maybe take it all the way to a year or even 2 years. You can do the same thing with meat, of course. Meat is something that, if frozen, if you have a freezer, a very cold freezer, you can take fresh meat and keep it frozen. It'll start to deteriorate quality-wise. It doesn't go bad, but it will start to taste a little bit different after 6, 7, 8 months. After a year, you can definitely taste it. After about 18 months is when it's like, this sort of doesn't taste very good anymore. For some, I'm okay with it. It's just a little, I don't know, beef turns gamey and chicken turns a little chewy. But again, as long as it's hard frozen, it's still good. Okay, you can keep that for a couple of years at the very least. And once again, if you're doing smart rotations, if you have a large freezer or an external freezer, in a deep freeze, then that's a great way to stockpile. And this is not for preppers. You can, by the way, listen to my prepper podcast. You can even subscribe to my prepper Substack with the podcasts over at lateprepper.substack.com, where I go into far more details about the preparedness component of it. But yeah, get into a rotation, get your food stocked up here within the next, again, like they're saying, 6 to 9 months is when it's going to really start hitting. That makes a lot of sense. And unless something drastic happens here soon, this is not a question of if but when. The damage is already done as far as the Strait of Hormuz. Even if it's reopened in this week, there still has been plenty of damage done because we are already in the middle of Northern Hemisphere's spring planting season, and so changes have been made. There's already the food crisis is already happening. It just hasn't hit us directly yet because, of course, it affects down the line, not the immediate present. So keep all that in mind. I'm not trying to fearmonger. I'm not trying to get you all riled up. I'm just telling you, factually speaking, this is where we are, and it behooves us to take into consideration that in the future, whether that's the near future or a little bit more distant, maybe a year and a half off, but at some point, it does appear that food prices are going to spike. So prepare accordingly.
This is your wake-up call, pal.
We tried to get us some footage in Los Angeles to depict the apocalypse, but there were just too many people, so we had to turn to artificial intelligence, which defines the apocalypse as apparently slow-motion objects coming out of the ground for some reason, and us standing there in the middle of the street depressing our children before oddly walking away from them. I guess that's the apocalypse, according to AI, along with marbles, glass on the ground blowing away. But hey, at least we'll be eating well because we will have real food, not AI food, real food from Heaven's Harvest, which you can get by going to jdrucker.com/food, jdrucker.com/food. It's fantastic food, number one. Number two, it'll give you hope, even if you're filthy. I mean, even if your hair is unkempt and things are crazy, you can still look up and know that you're buying from a Christian company at jdrucker.com/food. President Trump floated an idea on Monday that I hadn't heard anybody mention before. It's new to me. I'm sure somebody has said it, but I know that I hadn't heard it. It's pretty crazy. And I know a lot of things that President Trump has been doing lately have seemed crazy, but this one is just crazy enough that it might work, at least under a certain circumstance. While he was at a round table in Memphis for the Memphis Safe Task Force, he decided to say, you know what? We should combine the Save America Act with the DHS funding bill. it's, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And I would say that it could actually work. Now, John Thune, Senate Majority Leader, total rhino and part of the GOP establishment, part of the uniparty swamp, he's already shot down the idea from his perspective. But hey, you know what? I'm open to anything at this point because we need both. We need DHS funded. We need the Save America Act. During the roundtable, President Trump said, "We want voter ID. We want proof of citizenship as part of our funding. We want to merge them so that we can get the great, big, beautiful bill in action." I'm suggesting very strongly that the Republicans, in going for the Save America Act, that you weld it into exactly this, because voter ID is part of Homeland Security. And I'll keep going with what he said, but let's stop right there. That is 100% correct. He is very accurate when he says that, and I would argue that it is a national security issue. John Solomon has talked about it. It's funny because I mentioned it earlier today. John Solomon has mentioned these new reports showing that China basically hacked the 2020 election. It's funny because everybody was always talking about, oh, Trump hacked the 2016 election. Russia hacked it. Everybody's hacking it. Well, no, China actually did. China actually hacked the election. And that alone should tell us that safeguarding the election is part of the responsibility of the Department of Homeland Security. It is a national security issue. Let's keep going with what the president said. He said, think of it. We're talking about two separate items, but they're really the same. Voter ID is part of Homeland Security. Proof of citizenship is part of Homeland Security. So I think it should be welded in. I think it should be together. Now, of course, the chances of this happening are slim to none, okay? But it's 2026. The chances of anything happening are pretty much 50-50, right? Literally anything that's not impossible, it either happens or it doesn't. I would argue that just a month ago, people would have said that the chances of the U.S. killing and Israel killing Ayatollah Khamenei would have been pretty close to zero. We thought, oh my gosh, he's in a bunker 80 stories down. There's no way he's going to pop his head up. But thanks to apparently, possibly, I know it's a rumor or a theory, but possibly thanks to information that was conspicuously given to Tucker Carlson, possibly maybe ahead of the strike, that might have been what prompted the Ayatollah and a whole bunch of leaders to come out into the daylight and to actually allow themselves to be targeted by the Israelis, utilizing U.S. intelligence. If that were the case, that would be quite funny, but that's not the death of anybody is funny, but you get the idea. It would be ironic if that were the case, and we're not going to dwell on that. Let's talk about this, though. Chances of it happening, Thune has already shot it down. He's already said, no, we can't do that. It's untenable. What was his words? He said I don't know. He said something dumb, something Thune-like. I was just so annoyed with that guy. But yeah, it is. It is a national security issue. President Trump is right, and it should be put together. And if it were put together, that would be an ideal excuse to invoke the end of the filibuster, to just put it all together. Let's get stuff done while we still have a majority in the Senate. Because here's the thing. If Democrats are allowed to cheat during the midterm elections, then there's a very good chance they will take control of the House. there is a chance, a little bit slimmer, but still a chance they could take control of the Senate. And if they do, if they can take control of both or even just the Senate alone, I can assure you they will eliminate the filibuster altogether. They've already tried. They've already failed, thanks to Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. They failed, but if they could have gotten one of them to flip, they would have already killed the filibuster. So what are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? Well, do we really just want to wait until Democrats have control and just let them do it? Because if we don't safeguard our elections now, then there's zero chance that we will be able to do it in the very near future. You know why? Because once they get control, they will make it to where they have essentially, I won't call it permanent rule, but a very strong, firm hold on control of the Senate. So now's the time. We need it for the TSA. You know, the TSA is out there complaining. I know it's good that President Trump sent ICE agents because we got to get these lines moving, right? And they have been moving. That was the report from Monday. Even CNN was acknowledging that the lines were moving faster than they were before. So that's a good thing. But here's the counter. TSA, they're like, okay, great. So it's making the lines shorter. It's making the job less stressful, but we're still not getting paid. And they're not. And you've got Senate about to leave, House is about to leave. They're going to go on like a 2-week vacation. If they don't have these two bills passed, or preferably one big, beautiful DHS bill that includes the Save America Act, if they don't have that passed, they should not go. They can't go. That would be, the most horrific thing that they could possibly do is to leave everybody hanging, all these TSA agents, leave everybody hanging and just not funded. That would just be a slap in the face. It'd be the most un-American thing that John Thune and his cronies could possibly do. And at this point, it looks like that's the direction they're heading. They don't want to put together a unified bill. They don't want to kill the filibuster. The only good thing they've done so far is they've stuck to their guns a little bit on the DHS funding. But I would imagine that they would be more likely to cave to Democrat demands than to do what's right, what's best for the American people. And that would be, of course, to kill the filibuster, get both bills passed, combine them together, make it one bill. I don't care. 2 bills, 1 bill, 3 bills. Split it all up. I don't care. Just get the funding done. Now, back to the reason why. Let's instead of just telling you about what Solomon has uncovered, let me just go ahead and play. He was on, who was he on with today? I think he was on with Glenn Beck, and he told Glenn Beck all about what was happening. And to be fair, he was very cynical about it because it seems like nothing's happening, and he has a right to be cynical, and we all should, because nothing is happening with it. But maybe something will happen. We'll see. Here's John Solomon on with Glenn Beck.
Let me go to John Solomon. I know your site is leading with the Chinese spy. Can you give us an update on that, John, before we get into the rest of the news of the day?
Yeah, listen, 5 years, almost 6 years after the U.S. intelligence community first discovered that China had gained access to Americans' voter registration data, we're finally finding out. The Congress had no idea. The president had no idea. The American public had no idea. And that's kind of remarkable because 2 years ago in Great Britain, when Great Britain revealed that its voter registration data had been accessed by China, hacked by China, there was national recrimination. There was a national crisis, major changes to security. There were people who were fired. There were hearings and blue ribbon panels. Great Britain took such a breach of the election system very seriously. But in America, the CIA, FBI, the DHS, in the end of the Trump and the beginning of the Biden era, just deep-sixed it, didn't let anybody know. So we head into the 2026
Not
election.
even the president.
Yeah, does not. There's not evidence that the president. But the reason I say that is because we have now a report from the ombudsman for the United States intelligence community, and that ombudsman wrote that his name was Barry Zoloff, and he wrote that this evidence was kept from the president himself, specifically because U.S. intelligence analysts inside the CIA, inside the FBI, inside the Homeland Security Department didn't like Donald Trump. They called him the vulgarian in the Oval Office. That's actually what they wrote about their commander-in-chief in their own emails. And that they chose not to brief on this because they didn't want Donald Trump's policies on China to succeed. So you have an intelligence committee caught red-handed, putting their political interest ahead of their country's interest.
John, when is any of this going to make any difference?
It's a great question, right? We're a week into these revelations. The White House hasn't driven a narrative from the podium. You don't see Carolyn Levin talking about it on the podium, even though the evidence is absolutely dispositive. We put the declassified evidence into the president has put it up on Truth. He's raised some concerns about it. The President's Intelligence Advisory Board, chaired by Devin Nunes, they announced today that they're going to be investigating this. Senator Ron Johnson is seeking the documents from the Senate Public Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. But the administration, which has everything to gain in helping the American people understand this, fix it. For instance, where we got a debate going on in the Senate right now over the SAVE Act, the Save America Act. No, none of the senators know if their state was hacked by China. That's something that the Trump administration bureaucracy could do today. They could set up briefings for the senators and give them that information.
Why won't they?
I don't know. I don't know. Apparently, they can only handle one thing at a time. Democrats can handle 5 things at a time, right? But we seem preoccupied.
This
with
administration has proven that they can handle 100 things at a time. I don't buy into that.
Yeah, well, if they choose to. But here's a situation. They knew it was coming. The White House knew this was coming. The CIA knew it was coming. The DNI knew it was coming. They released the documents. But they've yet to contact the senators and tell them what states are there. And so I continue to ask those questions.
Who wins?
We've got more coming.
Who wins if we don't pay attention to this? I'm trying to figure out motive on why you wouldn't say anything. What is the gain?
Right? China wins.
Right.
If their capabilities are still preserved, because there hasn't been the sort of alert that Great Britain did. And then one could argue the Democratic Party does. And I say that only because of the documents that Kash Patel released last June, that we broke here at Just the News in June of last year, that China sent tens of thousands of fake driver's licenses into Chicago O'Hare Report to be distributed around the country. And the goal of that, according to the FBI's own counterintelligence sources inside China, was for China to register people, to fake people, to vote for Joe Biden, help Joe Biden beat President Trump in the 2020 election. Now, we intercepted those, but it's pretty clear that China either has a preference with the Democratic Party or some sort of alliance with the Democratic Party based on what the FBI wrote.
Well, there you go. Proof positive. President Trump is absolutely correct. This is a national security issue. Department of Homeland Security should be much more engaged with safeguarding our elections than they currently are. And it's ironic that as somebody who spends a whole lot of time trying to pay attention, trying to strategize to see what I can do, what I can tell other people to do, what I can recommend as far as strategies for America, strategies to make America great again, to put America first, somewhat Republican strategies, I guess, simply because Republicans tend to lean more towards what I want to see than Democrats do, of course. But yeah, it's ironic that I didn't see this. I didn't think of it. It's a no-brainer once you understand it. Of course, this should be one bill, and it should be done through ending the filibuster, which means they have to get Murkowski on board. They got to get Rand Paul. Of course, he supports the Save America Act. He co-sponsored it, but he does not support ending the filibuster. A lot of people won't. Tom Tillis, just because he's a petulant child, lame duck, doesn't care, hates Trump. John Thune himself, Senate Majority Leader, doesn't want to do anything. I mean, he is. It's funny because my concern when he was pushed forward as the Senate Majority Leader, my concern was that he was going to be a more lucid version of Mitch McConnell. And I would argue that he's far worse than Mitch McConnell, even when Mitch McConnell still had his full capacity. The reason being is that Thune is able to. McConnell wasn't very good at hiding his rhino-ness. Okay, he was a Chinese owned. He was owned by China. owned by Big Pharma. Still is. I mean, it's not that he was. He still is. He's just not him in control anymore. He's got handlers that are taking care of everything for him, right? But he was open about it. Maybe not. He didn't declare it, but he didn't try to hide the fact that Big Pharma and China, and I'm sure others, military-industrial complex, did control how he ran the Senate. Thune is still pretending to be a full-blown Republican and not a rhino. Thune is still pretending to be an America-loving, patriotic, America-first conservative. But he's not. He's not even close. He is the Uniparty Swamp's Republican handler for the Senate. That's it. If he were able to do his job properly, then, and he is capable, by the way, if he was willing, is probably the better way to put it. If he was willing to do his job properly, he could round up the caucus. He could get all of this stuff done. He could pass the Save America Act. He could fund DHS. He could get a whole bunch of other things done, things that need to be done, things that could never pass through a filibuster, but that obviously could pass with a Republican majority, which we currently have. How long will we have that majority? Well, it depends upon what John Thune does. If he does what President Trump wants, then it's a good chance that we can not only retain the majority, but actually make things happen, reduce the size of government, lower taxes, lower expenses, reduce the bureaucracy, do a lot of the things that even rhinos generally are okay with. I know they don't want to reduce the size of government, but we can kind of force their hand on that one. Codify so many of the things that President Trump has already put into place in his first year of his second term. But I just have no faith that he's willing to do that. He's like a McConnell, but worse. He's the worst kind of rhino. The one that's able to hide his rhino-ness. We're seeing a little bit of that with John Cornyn right now, but people are finally starting to see through it. I think it was Matt Boyle from Breitbart who said that he is a dead man walking, that he's going to lose. He's currently losing badly to Ken Paxton for the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate, a seat that Cornyn currently holds. He is very likely to lose the primary. Why? Is it because Ken Paxton is such a perfect candidate? No. And I love Ken Paxton, to be clear. But no, he's got tons of baggage. He really does. But people have seen through Cornyn. Now, will people see through Thune? I think they're starting to. And if Thune is able to make it all the way through to the election without passing the Save America Act, and if he is able to get booted, he should not be the Senate minority leader. He should be ousted from leadership altogether. I wish that could happen today, but they're going to give him a chance. They're going to give him the opportunity to get things done. The only way that he can truly do that is to accept and acknowledge the Democrats, once they get control of the Senate again, they will kill the filibuster. So the only logical path forward is to preemptively kill it. Get the stuff done that you need done so that you don't get stuck in permanent Democrat limbo. That's where we're heading if he doesn't do it. I truly fear that. So he has to get it done. He has to do what so many of us have already known to do. He should know to do it. He hasn't yet, but maybe he'll come around. It is 2026. Crazier things have happened. But when it comes to the Save America Act, when it comes to DHS funding, when it comes to the filibuster, he needs to make the right move. And that right move is to listen to President Donald J. Trump.
Stay out of my territory.